Hello and welcome to my shop. What I'd like to do today is demonstrate a few of the techniques I use to cover model airplane wings. What I'm going to be using is a material called Polyspan. It is a very light woven polyester material. It comes in a plain white color on a roll like this. You can see it's quite translucent, and it has no adhesive on it, so you have to brush the adhesive on the framework of the airplane that you're covering. You iron it on and then you shrink it with heat. Fill it with a few coats of filler. I like to use dope, and then paint. Sounds simple. And with the right tools and some time and patience, you can get great results. What I'm going to use as a test subject is an absolutely gorgeous new kit from Airdrome RC. It is a 1/6 scale Albatross D3 World War I German fighter. It is very scale, and it includes also a scale airfoil. This is the top wing that I'm going to be covering. And if you look at it edge on, you can see it's a very, very thin profile, and also it's undercambered. So when you cover an undercambered airfoil, there's some techniques that you have to do that are a little bit different than with a regular wing. So I'll show you what to do. Alright, let's get to it. Here's my trusty assistant Oliver in the background there. As I mentioned, the material does not have any adhesive on it, so you have to brush an adhesive on the framework. I like to use Sig Stix-It. It works really well. The only drawback of it's dope or lacquer based, so it does really stink up the workshop. It's quite stinky. Not the greatest to breathe in for long periods of time, but it does work really well. Now, typically when you cover a model airplane wing, you with a normal non-undercambered airfoil, you take the covering, you tack it down in the edges, and iron it all around the perimeter and shrink it. That will not work with an undercambered airfoil, obviously, because if you did that, it would shrink tight from the leading to trailing edges and not be attached to the ribs. So what you have to do is you have to apply adhesive to every single rib on the bottom. Time consuming, yes, but the end result is worth it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. Right, so here we go. So we might as well start with the extreme edge here. We'll brush some adhesive onto the wingtip. Make sure we get a nice... You don't need much. This stuff actually works quite well. You can spread it quite thin. And it'll still stick very well when you iron on the covering. So here we go with the first rib, and you just take the brush, and apply a bead of adhesive on it. Now, I did just say a second ago you don't need much, and generally that's true, but I'm going to recommend that when you do the undercambered surface like this, that you make sure you have a good layer, a good coat of adhesive on each and every rib, because this is something that you just can't have fail. Once it's painted, if the covering lifts from the rib, it's very, very difficult to reattach it without ruining your paint finish. Now, on the bright side, if you do this right, it will not lift. My Gotha G4 project that I built quite a few years ago now also has an undercambered airfoil and was covered with exactly the same method, and it has shown absolutely no sign of the covering lifting whatsoever. It stays stuck on there really nicely. Very durable covering, long lasting, looks great. So I'm just going to keep going here and do every one of these ribs. It'd be a very long video if I taped every single rib being done, so I'll carry on. And while you're working on the ribs, once you get to the trailing edges here, also put a coat of Stix-It on all the trailing edges, and just flip it up and do this side as well, the very back of the trailing edge. And of course, do the leading edge too. Let's get a bead of adhesive going there. Because we're going to wrap the covering around the wingtip, we also want to make sure that we get some adhesive on the top of the wingtip at this time, just around the edges here. And also, while you're here, do the rest of the leading edge as well, the top surface of it, because we're going to do the same thing. We'll wrap it around. And I'll carry on doing that. Alright, our Stick-Set adhesive is all dry, so now we're going to go ahead and get ready to cover. I've got some Polyspan here. It does have a definite grain. If you buy it on a roll like this, it goes parallel with the long edge. And there's also a good side and a not as good side. You want to make sure you get the rougher side down against the wood so that you're finishing the smoother side. So we'll just measure it out, and we will cut a piece to shape. I'm going to do this all in one piece. And give yourself some overlap to work with, maybe an inch or so, or whatever you feel comfortable with. We'll grab our scissors. I'm going to cut it to length first. And now I'm going to go ahead and just trim off the back edge. Now, one other thing I have to do with the covering here, there's 8 strut attachment points that I have to make slits for. So I'm going to pull the covering sort of tight, and then just take a pencil and carefully mark where each one of these strut points is. And then when I'm done with that, I'll take the covering off, and using a sharp blade, I'll make a slit for them to get through. Alright, so I got my straight edge out and a sharp blade, and I'm just going to make a slit at each one of the locations that I've marked. Now, I'm going to go ahead and lay that back on. And hopefully it'll all sort of line up. And lo and behold, it does. Right, it is time to do some ironing. Now, to attach the covering, I like to use a trim iron. It's you can see the tip is quite small, and it's just much easier to handle. You can get into the small corners much easier than you can with a larger iron. So I highly recommend for work like this a trim iron. For the Stick-Set and the Polyspan, I usually put the slider right about in the middle, maybe just a notch above the center point, and that seems to be a good place to start with the heat. Also plug it in, give it 5 or 10 minutes to warm up and come to a stable temperature. Right, our iron's hot and we're ready to go. Now, as I said before, there's some differences with an undercambered wing. Normally with a standard wing, you would start at one of the top edges and go diagonally and do it that way. With a undercambered wing, it's important that you start in the middle and work out. So the very first point that I'll start, make sure again that your spaces and everything's aligned fairly nice. I will pick the center of the wing, one of the ribs at the center of the wing, and I'll also start right in the middle of that rib as well. And I'll just take my iron and I'll just slowly tack it, and I'll just tack that in place right there. Maybe for about a 1/4 inch of a length. Then give the extreme edges a little tug to tighten it up a little. And then move on to the next rib and again tack it down. And then move to the other side and tack. And just keep tightening the covering up a little bit, hold it tight, and then when you iron it, when you tack it down, just slowly and lightly drag the iron so that you're actually tautening the covering a little bit as you're tacking it. And you need to do this at every single rib location. Doesn't take much pressure. Just let the heat of the iron do the work. And you can see by dragging the iron a little bit like that, just keeping it fairly taut as we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep tacking along the length of this wing. Try and keep it in line so that each one of your tack points forms a straight edge. I've strayed a little bit already. Doesn't make that big of a difference. And we're almost at the wingtip now. The dreaded wingtip. Actually, with Polyspan, wingtips are no longer dreaded, even with these crazy compound undercambered curves. So start pulling it tight a little bit, and at the same spot, just on the edge of the wingtip, go ahead and tack it down there. And now go ahead and carry on going the other way. So I'll just keep doing that, and we'll be back shortly. Alright, we've got our covering tacked on at the middle of each rib, so now it's time to attach the covering to the rest of the wing. So again, starting at the middle, grab the leading edge of the covering and pull it just a little bit tight, and then slowly work from the point where you've tacked the rib beforehand forward towards the leading edge. And once you've done one, move over to the next rib, and again grasp it near the leading edge, pull gently, just try and get as many of the wrinkles out now, and starting out where you tacked it, slowly attach the covering to the rib, moving towards the leading edge. And make sure it's sealed down good. As long as you're at the leading edge, go ahead and seal it to the bottom of the leading edge as well. So there's one bay done there. Move on to the next rib. And you just repeat the process once again. Now, even though I'm showing you how to do this with Polyspan, if you're using a iron-on plastic covering that already has the adhesive on it, the technique is the same. You would start at the, obviously you don't put any adhesive down, but you would start at the middle and go out. Even with plastic, I'd recommend you put some sort of adhesive on the bottom of these ribs just so that it doesn't pop loose. I believe balsa is a good film covering adhesive. Not sure what people use these days for stuff like that. Even a thin Stix-It would probably be a good idea, because Stix-It will thin with lacquer thinner, acetone, or dope thinner. One of the great things about using Polyspan and dope is that when you go to seal your covering in preparation for paint with clear dope, is the first coats of clear dope will soak through the covering and stick to the Stix-It that's already there, so it makes it a really, really good tight bond that's just not going to come loose. I don't know if a plastic film would be nearly as strong or as long-lasting, but anybody who covers their World War I scale airplane with a plastic film should be shot anyway. Oops, did I say that on camera? Right, now that I'm sure I've annoyed some of you, I will go ahead and just turn the camera off, and I'm going to go and finish the wing. Okay, here we are at one of the wingtips, so I just thought I'd take a little extra time and just to show you what I do for the wingtip. You can see I've gone ahead and done the forward part of each rib. So now I just take it, the covering, and I just gently tug and heat and just go around the perimeter of that the wingtip. Again, tug and heat at the same time and seal it down. Oh, and I can go ahead and do this tiny little sub-rib here. Alright, well, that's the beginnings of the wingtip. I will now carry on and do the other half of the wing. Alright, the front half of the wing is done. Now we're going to go ahead and finish off with the back half. So all you do now is the reverse of what you did to the forward half. And just go along each rib. Right to the back. Gently pulling the covering as you're doing it. You don't want to tug too hard on the covering. A gentle tug is enough. If you pull too hard, you run the risk of tearing it. It is very tough, and you can't really tear it. It almost just opens the grain up too much if you pull too hard. The weave starts to come apart, if you know what I mean. So a little bit is all it takes, and just go ahead and do the rest of the wing. And you can see already, just with the little bit of heat coming off the iron as you iron onto each rib, the covering's already starting to get a little bit taut. It's looking real good. Once we put the heat gun to this, it's going to shrink perfectly and there'll be not a wrinkle in sight. So I'll just carry on and finish off the rest of the wing. Okay, we're getting to a wingtip again. So I know a lot of people do have troubles with wingtips, so I just want to take a little extra time and show you how I do it. So you can see there's some potential wrinkles here. So what you don't want to do is grab the iron and get right in there and start pushing and doing that. You're going to guarantee you have a wrinkle if you do that. You just sort of have to, again, tug gently, get as much out as you can, and then just tack one end. Alright, so then I'll go ahead and seal the trailing edge here. And once you got that, do some more tugging and just tack it down to the very outer perimeter of the wingtip. There we go. So that looks pretty good already, and we haven't even put the heat on to shrink it. So that's going to work out great. Alright, the covering's now been attached to the entire undersurface of the wing. Now what we want to do, let's just put the wing up on its edge here a little bit, and eventually the top covering is going to wrap around the leading edge, and we'll have the seam on the bottom. That way it'll be hidden. So you want to make sure this bottom covering has a good grasp of that leading edge. So about halfway around the leading edge, just go ahead and attach that along the entire length to make sure it stays put. So I'll go ahead and finish that. Okay, back to a little bit more work on the wingtip. We've flipped the wing right way up now, and I'm going to use a fresh number 11 blade. Important that you have nice sharp blades when you're working with this stuff. And I'm just going to make a bit of a relief cut diagonally right from the corner of the wingtip out. And I've turned the heat up on the iron a little bit. Excuse me while I climb over the chair. And now we want to wrap the bottom covering around the wingtip and seal it down. So the reason I've turned the heat up a bit is just to make it a little bit more pliable. Again, once we cover the top surface, we're going to wrap the top covering over the wingtip and secure it on the bottom, keeping all the seams on the bottom of the model. So you don't have to have a huge area secured to this part of the wingtip, but you do want to get it down there. So, and what I'm using is just the very tip of the iron, and I'm just slowly going over there. I'm ironing maybe a seam that's 1/8 of an inch wide or so, a little bit at a time. Just let the heat do the work, and it'll almost flow like melted butter right onto the framework. Like so. Alright, so I guess while we have this out, we'll do a little trimming. We'll get our number 11 blade in there, and then just slide it slowly. Right to the edge. Just peel that piece back, and then we'll take our iron, and the seam that we've just cut, we'll just make sure that's tight down against the material. Like that. And we'll do the same to the rest of the leading edge. I've gone ahead and secured the covering to the leading edge, so just put the knife blade in. And trim it off like that. And we'll repeat the process for the other side. Relief cut. Gather up our covering. So a lot of the job is just getting yourself in the right position here. So gather up the covering and let the heat do the work. So we've done that, and we'll go ahead and finish trimming the leading edge. Flip it over again. Attach it a little better here. Like so. There. That piece trimmed off. And then we'll again go over the freshly cut edge with the iron just to seal it down tight against the framework. And I'll just finish that off camera. Alright, next we'll finish up our aileron bays here. Different ways to skin a cat here, I guess. I usually like to go diagonally from the corner out. And again, I'll make a relief cut at this corner. I'll just go straight on that one. This area here is for an aileron push rod, so that can be cut out entirely. That. Tip the wing onto its leading edge. And again, tug gently. And I just like to secure a lip of about, maybe a 1/16 of an inch. You can see you get to the edge on this and it's quite thin. So just carefully secure the covering to the edge there. Again, the top covering we're going to wrap around and down and keep the seam on this trailing edge. That way it'll be totally hidden from view once we're done. Take our sharp blade. A little loose here, we'll go over it one more time. Scrap away. And then just secure that to that inboard edge there. Now when you do it this way, you'll notice that you'll have a little piece here with no covering on it. Yes, you can certainly go back and put on a small patch of covering. I found if you're painting afterwards, by the time you put a few coats of dope on here to seal everything and then have it painted, it doesn't matter, it becomes invisible and you don't see it anyway, so I don't bother going back to recover that. And we'll concentrate on this seam a little bit. Right. Now I'm going to do the scalloped trailing edge here. Ow. And now I don't wrap this all the way around. I will just trim it flush to this scalloped trailing edge. And again, once you put the sealing coats of dope on and have the paint on, it doesn't matter that the covering is not wrapped all the way around. The seam becomes invisible and you don't see it at all. So I'll do the exact same thing on the other side, and then we'll get back to this cutout here and this curved cutout here, which might be a little tricky. Alright, now how to take care of this curved cutout area. Obviously you can't just try and iron it through, so you're going to need a series of relief cuts. And I'm just going to see how many I think I'm going to need. You basically want to see where the sharpest corner is and just make a few. That's probably enough. Now, the magic of Polyspan. Again, with the iron up in temp a little bit, grab one of your little tabs that you've just cut and start applying heat. But no pressure, just heat. And you'll find that as the heat gets into it, into the covering, it becomes very, very pliable, and then you can gently just lay it into place. Polyspan, it really is remarkable stuff. And same goes for the rest of the cutout here. So try and start in the middle when you have a long one like this, and then work towards the edge. And in any area that looks like it's going to be a little bit difficult, the secret is heat before ironing. Get the covering warm and it'll get soft and pliable. It'll almost lay itself right into place. And then you can secure it. So we'll go ahead and trim that. Oops. And again, iron down the freshly cut edge. Now because of the relief cut, you will have little areas here where there's a triangular wedge that isn't covered. You can certainly go ahead and apply a strip of covering over top. I don't think I'm going to do that. The area is quite small. And again, with the filling coats of dope, I think that's going to pretty much totally disappear anyway. So all I have left to do is one little piece of trimming here. Finish sealing that down. Alright, there you have it. The wing is covered. So we're ready for our next step, and obviously that's to put on the top covering. Before I get to that, I want to point out what I think is an important feature of maintaining a wrinkle-free covering. You notice these ribs here, they all have a small hole in them that's intended for servo wires. It's great that these holes are here, because what it does is it creates vent holes to the entire wing. What you want to avoid at all costs when the covering is on is a sealed area that air can't get in and out of. The wing has to be able to breathe. If not, it's going to sit in the hot sun in the summer. The air inside the covering base is going to expand. It's going to balloon out, and it will pop the covering off. And that's how you get your wrinkles, and that's a real pain when that happens. So it's great that these are vented, but if you notice, there are areas where there are no. If this was covered up, this entire area here would be not vented. So I'm going to have to go ahead and get a little drill and just make some holes in all the ribs to make sure everything is vented. You can use almost anything to do that. A pin would work fine. I've got a pin vise with a tiny little 1/32 inch drill in it. So obviously would it be better to do this before you put any covering on, but I forgot, so I'm going to do it now. So just make a hole in each area that makes a vent, that would make a sealed compartment if it didn't have a hole. You can just use a pin, like I said, make a couple of pinholes. I find sometimes with pinholes they can seal themselves up again and you don't get as much airflow as you would like. Alright, so that's vented there. That would vent through here, so that's good. And I'll do the same thing here. Actually, this one's vented through there, goes through here, and that's all vented too. So that's great, that's already vented. So now we have to get ready to cover the top of the wing. Now there's an advantage to doing the top, because when you shrink the covering, it won't be trying to pull away from a rib. It will actually be drawing the covering tauter onto this curved surface. So because of that, we don't have to iron the covering onto each individual rib. So I don't even put any adhesive on the ribs. The only place I put the adhesive is on the perimeter of the entire wing. And obviously where we want our overlap on the bottom, we're going to have to iron the covering onto what's already been covered. And because there's no adhesive, we're going to have to put adhesive exactly where the overlap is. So, time for more Stick-It. And you just brush a thin coat right on top of the Polyspan. Now don't worry if it doesn't look pretty when you iron the other stuff on top, and shrink it and put your sealing coats of dope on and then the paint. It just it blends right in, it shrinks right out. You will have no problem at all. As far as the trailing edge, I only put it on this vertical surface. because that's where I will be ironing the covering onto. A little bit heavy on the adhesive here. And of course the wingtip, you want to put some glue down right on top of the overlap from the bottom covering. So I'm just going to go ahead and brush adhesive around the entire outer perimeter of the wing, and we'll see in a bit. So here we are back at the bench, and I've cut a piece of covering for the top of the wing, and as I said before, I've applied adhesive only around the extreme perimeters of the entire airframe. The ribs themselves have no adhesive, so we won't be ironing onto that. And because now we have a conventional shaped wing with no undercamber, we will attach the covering in the regular manner. Now, what I like to do is I like to start at one corner. So I will pick this corner and lightly, actually not that lightly, but securely attach the covering to that corner. And once that's on, I'll go diagonally to the opposite corner, and I'll stretch it fairly tight, and I'll tack it down to this corner. Now once I've got that corner done, I'll go to an opposite corner here, and I'll try and keep it sort of taut. And we'll attach to that corner. And again, we'll go to the extreme opposite corner. Tighten this up as much as we can. We'll attach it to there. Next, I go to the midpoint, and I'll just sort of try and stretch it over there, keeping as many wrinkles out as I can, and I'll tack it there. And also to the leading edge. Polyspan shrinks quite nicely, so you don't have to really wrench on it. In fact, it's best if you don't. Alright, now that's basically what I'm going to do is just keep doing more of the same until I've attached it to the entire perimeter. Next I'll choose here, and I'll tack it to the trailing edge here. And while I'm here, I'll finish off with this rounded cutout portion of the wing. I'll just go ahead and do the entire wing, and when I'm ready to finish the wingtips, I'll give you a close-up view of that. Alright, so it's tacked down almost all the way around. I just have the wingtip left to do. As you can see, it's not bad already. So just pick the midpoint and try and get the wrinkles out, and then tack it down. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, you see it attaches here, but the wrinkles form here. So I'm going to actually heat this part, stretch it around, and then tack it down. So heat, stretch it around, and tack. And you can see that the wrinkles that are formed there are pretty minor. And same with this portion here. We'll move towards the back. Not too much heat and stretch required here, just a little bit. That's the top part. Now we want to overlap that onto the bottom. So again, I pick the midpoint and tack it down. Because we've wrapped it around like this, you don't need a lot of overlap in the seam. 1/8 of an inch is enough. Where the compound curve start is where it gets trickiest, so just bear with me here. Oops. And we'll try to get it into the camera here as well. You can see here where there's a lot of wrinkles, or could be a lot of wrinkles if you're not careful. So don't try and do a lot at once. Iron down a 1/16th or even a 32nd of an inch at a time. Let the heat do the work. There we go. So what I'll do now is I'll just finish up along the leading edge here, securing everything just around the seam. We've wrapped it around the front, so now we're just going to attach it to the bottom of the leading edge for where the final seam is going to be. And I'll just carry on. Alright, our wing is covered, and now it's everybody's favorite time to shrink. This is when we see all our hard work come to fruition, when the wrinkles just disappear before our eyes. So you can use an iron to shrink it. I prefer a heat gun. This is not a hair dryer. A hair dryer doesn't get hot enough. This gets extremely hot, and don't dry your hair with this, otherwise that'll be the last time you ever dry your hair. This particular heat gun has two settings, low and high. I use the low setting. The high setting, if you have a really difficult area, you can very judiciously use it, but you do have to be careful because you can melt the covering. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Start at the middle, and again, because each rib has the covering iron to it, you're really going to shrink it bay by bay. You're not shrinking it as an entire unit like you would at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. You want to keep the heat gun moving. Don't keep it in one spot for too long because that increases the chances that you're going to melt through. As you can see, I can get very close to the covering without worrying about melting. And this is always the case with Polyspan. The wrinkles are disappearing beautifully. Oh, to the wingtip. Look at that. Beautiful. No, you didn't see it. Well, we'll show it on the other one. Alright, hopefully you can get a bit of a close-up of the wingtip here. So, there's the bottom of our wing shrunk. And it is perfect, not a wrinkle in sight. Flip it over. Now, because we've only attached the covering to the perimeter, when we shrink the top, the entire covering shrinks and it becomes very drum tight. And once the clear dope goes on, the coats of dope will actually glue the covering down to each rib at that point. So it will eventually be glued down to each rib. So we will go ahead and start shrinking. Okay, just going to take some heat off it right now. If you have a look, I have an oopsie. If you see right here, there's a little hole that's opened up. It's not so much that the covering is melted, it's because it's started to shrink so tight that it's pulled itself apart. This is great because now I can show you how to patch holes later, and that's quite easy to do with Polyspan as well. Okay, so there we are. I'm just gonna give it a wing of flip over and make sure that it sits flat so there's no warps, and it's very true and flat, so it hasn't warped at all. And there we have it. Look at that. Beautiful wing. And it's as easy as that. So the next stage, we'll be putting the clear coats of dope on and the painting and the finishing. So we'll see you in the next video.